Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to this morning's press conference. I'd now like to pass things over to Leader of the Ontario Greens, Mike Schreiner. Mike.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm speaking to you from my home in Guelph on the Treaty 3 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and would like to reaffirm the Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. I've been meeting with rural municipal leaders all day yesterday, a bit on Sunday, and we'll be meeting with them again today. And over again in those conversations, the issue that keeps being brought up is the housing affordability crisis we are facing in Ontario. The housing crisis is affecting rural municipalities north, south, east, and west. And sadly, Doug Ford's answer is endless sprawl that makes life less affordable and paves over valuable farmland. The very same farmland that rural communities and families depend on for their livelihoods. The very same farmland that feeds Ontario. The bottom line is we can't eat pavement or asphalt. If the last 2 years of the global pandemic and the supply chain challenges we've been facing tell us anything, it's that we have to protect farmland, the farmland that feeds us. And we simply cannot continue to lose 175 acres of farmland each and every day in Ontario, the equivalent of 5 family farms every week. We must protect the land that feeds us. We must protect the farmland that provides the foundation for employing over 870,000 people in the food and farming sector and contributes over $50 billion to Ontario's economy. But the Ford government is plowing ahead with destructive highway projects and supercharging urban sprawl. Highway 413 alone would pave over 4,000 acres of farmland and supercharge sprawl on additional prime farmland, making life less affordable for people and requiring people to commute further and further to find an affordable place to call home. You know, Doug Ford thinks protecting farmland is red tape, but Ontario Greens know that's not the case. And contrary to what the Premier might think, we can increase housing supply without paving over the farmland that feeds us. It's about making better use of our existing built environment and building livable, affordable communities where everyone has an affordable place to call home, near where they work, shop, and play. The Ontario Greens will tackle the rural housing affordability crisis and protect prime farmland and rural livelihoods at the same time by championing smart growth within existing urban boundaries through gentle density, infill missing middle developments, and providing people with more housing choices through expanded zoning options. This includes allowing a minimum of duplex and triplex construction as a right in all residentially zoned areas and streamlining the process for laneway housing, secondary suites, basement apartments, and tiny homes. Reinstating the provincial brownfield remediation fund to support rural municipalities in safely building affordable housing on previously industrial sites in existing neighborhoods, and permanently protecting all prime farmland in Ontario to maintain food security and economic prosperity in rural communities. The Premier needs to face the facts. Increasing housing supply in Ontario does not require supersized sprawl that paves over more farmland. Ontario Greens have put forward solutions to the housing affordability crisis, and I'm looking forward to continue collaborating with all levels of government, including rural municipalities, as we tackle the housing affordability crisis facing communities all across this province. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We'll now move to the Q&A portion. So as I posted in the chat, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function or page me in the chat, and I will call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you. Okay, first up, we have Steve Paikin from TVO. Steve, please go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Steve.
That doesn't count as one of my questions, incidentally. What would you say is the number one obstacle right now to all of the things that you just described in terms of being able to have them happen?
Yeah, I think the number one obstacle is the province working in collaboration with all levels of government. You know, all too often, and we've heard this recently from the Premier, is blaming municipalities for creating roadblocks to affordable housing. The bottom line is the province has to step up. We have to make sure that we have the right zoning rules in place so people have more housing options. We have to make sure that funds are available for things like brownfield remediation, and also, quite frankly, to support working with nonprofits, co-ops, and social housing providers to increase housing supply. The bottom line is we have 88,000 acres of developable land zoned for development within existing urban boundaries. We do not need the Premier to impose sprawl on communities and on people.
My follow-up is, why do you think he's doing it then?
Well, you know, there's been a lot of good investigative journalism out there connecting things like the construction of Highway 413 to land speculators with deep pockets who also happen to be, you know, contributors to the Ford government. And so it appears that the Premier's vision of building the communities we want is to pave over the farmland that feeds us, that supports the livelihood of rural communities and rural economies, and not taking into consideration that people want to live in livable, affordable communities. People don't want to have to commute hours just to find an affordable place to call home. We can address the housing affordability crisis if the province collaborates with municipal and federal governments to increase housing supply within our existing built environment. We don't have to supercharge sprawl. We have to put people and communities ahead of deep pocket land speculators.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you have a question, please message in the chat or use the raise hand function. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, doesn't look like there's anyone else with a question right now. Just a reminder, if you need any more follow-up information, feel free to reach out to me by email. With that being said, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.